Hello, Sam Moser here. Welcome to the 6th video in my van build series. This one's going to be all about installing the window and the roof vent on my van. Roof vents are essential for creating airflow through the van. Almost all campers will have one, and in some cases it can be beneficial to install two. I talked about this more in my video on layout considerations, which I'll overlay a link to. You typically want to install exterior additions such as roof vents and windows early on in the build, because it's going to be easiest to do before you put up any insulation or anything on the walls. In my build, I first marked out where the cuts would be with a Sharpie. Then I used double-sided tape to hang trash bags around the areas that would be cut out. I wanted these to catch any shavings falling to the inside of the van and hopefully make them easier to clean up. This worked pretty well for the roof, but not quite as well for the window. It did at least keep them contained better, as when cutting with a jigsaw, the shavings can be flung pretty far. Next, I got everything set for the first cut. I laid masking tape around the area to be cut. This will prevent the metal base of the jigsaw from scratching the roof. I marked out the cut line on top of the masking tape. The flange of the fan can be used as a template for marking the cut line. Next, I drilled a hole in each corner. The jigsaw would use these to start cutting from and will basically just be connecting the dots. I found it best to start by drilling a small pilot hole, then a middle-sized hole, and finally a hole large enough for the jigsaw blade to fit through. You could also use a step drill bit and do this in one go, but I didn't have one of those. I used the drill on the lower speed setting as it didn't fling the shavings as far, which made them easier to vacuum up. Before cutting, I held up the roof vent flange to double check that I was cutting the opening the right size and shape. I also drilled 2 holes in the center. I used this as a test area before cutting on the actual line to make sure the jigsaw and blade were cutting well. Then I began cutting out the opening, trying to catch some of the shavings with a handheld vacuum at the same time. Only cut out 3 sides, then stop. If you cut out the whole thing at once, the cutout will fall through. You can add tape to the other 3 sides to keep it from falling as you cut the final edge. Sheet metal, like the exterior of the van is made of, cuts easily with a jigsaw. A fine-tooth blade should be used. I used a blade with 24 teeth per inch, which was about perfect. I'll put a link in the description below to the jigsaw blades I used as well as some of the other materials. Next, I filed the rough edges down a bit. I clamped the roof vent adapter and flange in place while I pre-drilled the holes for the screws. Then, I got ready to paint the edges. After any cut you make in the exterior of the van, you need to file and sand the edges smooth. Then, you need to paint the newly exposed metal to prevent it from rusting in the future. It's best to use multiple coats of paint. It's really best to use primer, then paint. There are lots of paints out there. I'll add links in the video description to the paints I used. While the first coat of paint was drying on the roof vent opening, I worked on cutting out the window opening. To mark the cut line for the window, I had to create a cardboard cutout of the window. This was all per the installation instructions from the window manufacturer. The window opening was cut out in mostly the same way as the roof vent, but instead of starting the jigsaw cut from a drilled hole, I used an angle grinder with a metal cutoff disc to cut out the straight opening to start the jigsaw from. The curves of the window opening were large enough that the jigsaw could make the corner, but be sure to go slow and stay on the cut line around the corners. I added tape as I went to hold the cutoff in place as I continued cutting. As more of the sides were cut free, the partially cut off section started to vibrate and swing, so this also helped to dampen that some. With the cutout removed, I did a quick test fit with the window and then began filing down the edges, followed by a little sanding in preparation for painting. Next, I got the shop vac out to start cleaning up all the metal shavings before pulling down the trash bags, then pulled those down and more vacuuming inside after that. It was pretty crazy seeing the van at this point with 2 big holes cut in it. Once the paint was dry on the cutout for the roof vent, I started the install. I would recommend using an adapter like this in between the roof and the flange. The bottom of the adapter matches the contour of the roof, giving a perfectly flat surface for the fan flange to sit on. This eliminates any additional gaps you might have under the flange due to the curve and grooves in the roof. Also, since the adapter fits into the grooves in the roof, it makes sure you get it aligned perfectly in the center of the roof. The adapter was what I actually used as a template for marking out the cut line. I adhered the adapter to the roof using 3M 4200 marine adhesive. Both surfaces were wiped down with acetone before applying the adhesive. I put toothpicks in the pre-drilled holes to make sure the holes I pre-drilled in the roof and adapter were still aligned. I lightly clamped the adapter in place while the adhesive was curing. I used a lot of clamps lightly set to give even pressure all around. It isn't totally necessary to clamp this while it cures, and if you do, don't clamp it very tightly. I spread the sealant that squeezed out evenly around the edges of the adapter. The masking tape was laid down ahead of time to make sure the sealant didn't get spread too far. All of this was per the installation notes that came with the adapter. Since I was installing both of these on the same day, I interleaved the work. So while the adhesive for the adapter was curing, I worked on getting some paint around the edges of the window opening. Back to the roof vent. I wiped down the top adapter surface and the flange with isopropyl alcohol before applying butyl tape, which creates the seal between the adapter and the flange. Then screws hold it all down. I found the screws that came with the roof vent to be just long enough, even with the adapter in the middle. I tightened the screws by hand in order to not over-tighten them and crack the plastic of the flange base. Next, self-leveling lap sealant went all over the screws and the edges of the adapter and flange. This sealant looks kind of messy, but it's supposed to provide a good UV-resistant seal. The last step is to attach the fan to the flange. I forgot to open the fan before setting it in place, so I had to climb back down and open it from the inside. The fan then secures to the flange with 2 screws on either side. Mounting the window was actually pretty easy. A sealing tape that came with the window is placed along the inner lip of the window. Then from the inside, a trim ring screws to the window along the edges and sandwiches everything in place. Some window cleaner was sprayed on the exterior mounting surface first, which allows you to slide the window around and get the placement just right before the trim ring is fully tightened and everything is clamped together. And then, that's it for the window install. Here are some photos of how everything looked at this point. If you've stuck around this far, I want to go over a couple more things, including a look at exactly which roof vent and window models I chose and what some of the others I looked at were. First though, I want to stress the 2 most important things to do regarding rust prevention whenever you cut or drill a hole in your van. The first is to be really conscious of metal shavings created while cutting openings in the van. The second is to file, sand, and paint the edges of metal after making a cut in the van. Metal shavings created while cutting, also referred to as swarf, may be small but have a large area of exposed steel and therefore will rust easily. It's really important to clean up all these shavings after making a cut. You don't want any of these hiding out on any surface of the van, whether it's inside or outside and painted or unpainted. If any shavings are left on unpainted or raw steel surfaces, they'll be like a catalyst for rust on these areas. If they are left on a painted metal surface, such as the exterior of the van, they can cause rust stains, which can be very hard to remove. So, after a cut, vacuum up the shavings and really look around to make sure you got everything inside and out. Additionally, for the exterior, after you finish installing the roof vent or window and everything is sealed up and watertight, it's best to give the van a wash. Besides washing away any lingering metal shavings, this will also help to make sure everything is indeed watertight. It'd be much better to discover and remedy a leak just after installation than further down the road. I also want to give a quick precaution about the roofs of cargo vans. As a general note, be careful where you step or place weight when working on the roof, as you can dent the roof if you step in the wrong spot. In general, you want to step over the areas where the beams go across underneath, as this is where the sheet metal roof is fully supported. It's easy to tell where these are, as the roof rack mounting points are located in the same spots as these beams. And be careful in general when working on a high surface like this. Now, For a look at roof vent models. There are a few different fans which are most commonly seen on camper roofs. The first would be the Fantastic vents, which are now sold by Dometic. I used this style of fan on the truck bed camper I built before the van. These fans work just fine, and different models come with different features, but they have one big drawback. They can't be left open in the rain, and during rainy times, you still want to be able to have a fan that can circulate fresh air, so this is kind of a big issue. You can buy a vent cover though, which attaches over the entire thing and keeps the water out. So as long as you get the cover as well, these are also a good option. The other common brand of roof fans is the MaxxFan by Maxxair. The MaxxFan Plus is basically the same style as the Fantastic and needs an additional cover to be left open in the rain. But the MaxxFan Deluxe has a built-in rain cover. When closed, it also has a much lower profile than the Fantastic style roof vent if you add a rain cover to it. Same as the Fantastic fans, the Maxxair fans come in different models with a variety of different features, the fanciest having electric lift and a remote control. I bought the MaxxFan Deluxe 7000K for my van, and I think it's a great fan. I've left it open during some pretty heavy rainstorms, and it does a great job keeping water out. The remote isn't a very essential feature, but it really is nice to have, as this allows me to be able to adjust the fan from the bed in our van where I can't reach the controls on the fan itself. Installation is about the same on both, and both require the same size cutout, a 14-inch by 14-inch square. The window I bought for my van was the front quarter panel T-slider from Motion Windows. I wanted a window that had a screened opening for ventilation. There are two different windows I considered. One being the window I bought from Motion Windows, and the other being the C.R. Lawrence vented window. Ultimately, I think the C.R. Lawrence window is nicer, but it's more expensive. I went with the Motion window since it's priced a little lower. I think the build quality of the Motion window is really good too. I can't speak for the other though, as I haven't seen one in person, but they look nice in photos. Each attaches using a clamp trim ring, so both have similar installations. The C.R. Lawrence window has curved glass and sits totally flush with the indented area in the side of the van, giving it the most stock look. The Motion window doesn't extend quite as far, and instead of having curved glass, it is made up of two flat sections with a slight bend in the middle of the frame to accommodate the curve in the wall of the van. Both also come with tinted glass, which is nice. If you watched my last video on the construction of the floor in the van, you may have noticed that I installed the window and the roof vent somewhere in between the stretch of time that I was working on the floor. The timing of this was because there just happened to be a weekend day with no rain on the forecast, so I figured it'd be a good time to knock out these exterior installations. So that covers it for this one. As always, thanks for watching. Keep on the lookout for the next video. Bye.